Would you go into work today and work all day for this? This teeny tiny tenth of an ounce of silver that is valued at a little over $2? Considering fast food workers are protesting that they want $15 an hour or $120 a day, I doubt very many would take me up on that offer for such a fraction of silver. Forget for a moment working for this little piece of silver at your current job, because if you're watching this video, it's probably too easy for this thought experiment. Now, would you slave away for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week in a difficult and dangerous job that will absolutely shorten your life for this tiny speck of silver? Of course not, right? If you wouldn't work for it with cushy, air-conditioned American jobs, then why would you work for much longer and in much harsher conditions for the same thing? You might then wonder why throughout all of human history and even 2/3 of the world today that humanity has constantly traded a day's worth of human labor for a tenth of an ounce of silver. The bigger implication is that while you may not have to today, are you really so sure that you won't have to tomorrow? Let us look at the fascinating historical examples of people who traded their lives for these tiny coins of silver. And most importantly, let us see why you need to be saving these tiny silver coins today to prevent you and your family from slaving away for them in much more dire times.
During the height of the Roman Empire, the average day's pay for the average soldier or worker was the silver denarius. The denarius was 1/10 of an ounce of silver and very similar to our silver dimes of yesteryear. What I find amazing is the implied value of this coin into our modern lives. This dime of the Roman Empire was the average day's pay for the average worker. It paid for all the living expenses of a man and his family, food, shelter, clothes, taxes, and maybe a little fun from time to time. How would we begin to relate the value of that silver dime to where we are today? First, think about the kind of work a Roman soldier or a field worker would have to go through to get that denarius. Most likely, that Roman soldier would be enduring terrible conditions or fighting hand-to-hand combat. The average worker would be working 12 hours a day using rudimentary tools, doing arduous tasks to eke out an existence. The average American soldier or laborer probably makes the minimum wage of about $8 an hour. If we multiplied $8 times 12 hours the Roman laborers and soldiers would have had to work, that would make the implied value of that silver denarius about $96. If a denarius is 1/10 of an ounce of silver, then the implied value of an ounce of silver is $960.
In the Bible, there is the mention of workers receiving a denarius for working in the vineyard. Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. These who were hired last worked only 1 hour. They said, "And you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work in the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be the first, and the first will be the last." How else would the meek inherit the earth if there was not a massive reversion of wealth back into the productive classes? We are seeing massive disparity of wealth, and it is empowering the worst in humanity that seeks more debt and more death. There is economic talk about stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, but that will only enable more collectivist psychopaths, more control over our lives. The individual solution is to stop working for their casino and stop saving in their casino chips. Buying silver will be time-tested value while their generational debt-based Ponzi scheme collapses. Only then will those with real friends, real skills, and real wealth like silver be the last that will be the first. Let's think about this another way. Judas betrayed Jesus Christ to death for 30 shekels of silver. Each shekel has about a half of ounce of silver in it. So those 30 shekels are about 15 ounces. Would you condemn anyone, your worst enemy, a stranger, a friend, much less the Messiah, to death for $285? Well, if we value silver the way we value it today, that's what it would work out to. But if we valued silver with this implied $960 an ounce, that same 15 ounces would be worth $14,400. That is a very big difference and seems to be very similar to those murder-for-hire plots you see on television. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu said, "In the operations of war, where there are in the field 1,000 swift chariots, as many heavy chariots, and 100,000 mail-clad soldiers, with provisions enough to carry them 350 miles, the expenditure at home and at the front, including entertainment of guests, small items such as glue and paint, and sums spent on chariots and armor, will reach the total of 1,000 ounces of silver per day. Such is the cost of raising an army of 100,000 men. That is less than 1/10 of an ounce of silver per soldier to march and die in battle."
The Spaniards arrived in Potosi in Bolivia in 1545 to exploit silver deposits at Cheruricu, referred to at the time as the richest mountain ever discovered anywhere on Earth. Exploiting the silver at Potosi required a large labor force. African slaves and indigenous natives were used. It is estimated that 6 to 8 million miners died extracting the ore due to exposure, brutal labor conditions, and from mercury poisoning as a result of the refining process.
I recently sat down and watched a movie that I had not watched in a long time called Far and Away with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. If you have not seen this movie, I highly recommend that you watch it. The movie starts off with tenant farmers that are slaving away on their landlord's property. They are protesting the raise in rents on their lands. Tom Cruise's dad is killed, and Tom swears revenge upon the landlord. His father's dying wish is that for his son to work his own land one day and be free. Without getting into the whole story about the huge wealth disparity, or lack of freedom, justice, or middle class, Tom and Nicole end up rushing off to America to get free land that America is giving away. The first thing I found interesting was that Nicole's privileged character transferred her wealth from Ireland to the United States in silver spoons. It provided for a lot of value in a very small space. When they arrived in America, they were met with all sorts of problems, including the theft of the silver and a murder. They were plunged into the bowels of society and ended up living in a whorehouse. They finally landed jobs in a chicken factory. There they worked 12 hours a day using steam hoses to take off the feathers of all the chickens. One night, Tom Cruise's character got all fired up and went to the local bar to do prize fighting. He came home drunk, beat up, with $4 in his boot. Then came the one comment that hit me like a rock. Nicole's character said that $4 was more money than she would make in a month at the chicken factory. Factory workers at the turn of the century earned about 10 cents a day, back when the dime was 1/10 of an ounce of silver. This dime for 12 hours of hard human labor is the same dime that Roman soldiers used back when the denarius was 1/10 of an ounce of silver. The $4 that Tom Cruise's character won prize fighting was more money than she would earn in 40 days of continuous hard human labor in that chicken factory. It doesn't stop there. We've all heard that 2/3 of the world today lives off of less than $2 a day. That would be the equivalent of less than 1/10 of an ounce of silver. With the mathematically inevitable collapse of the dollar, the fiat Ponzi scheme, all paper assets, humans will be forced to revalue everything that they do and desire. The idea that 1/10 of an ounce of silver represented 12 hours of hard human labor during the Roman times, factory workers at the turn of the century, and even 2/3 of the world today is very consistent. The average baby boomer has about $88,000 in retirement. While we all know that $88,000 is not enough to retire in this paper Ponzi scheme, and that you need over $1 million to be able to live comfortably, or at least replace the income that you would be giving up. But with interest rates so low, even that is not enough. The average baby boomer could easily purchase 1,000 ounces of physical silver. If you value that silver not in terms of dollars, how many days of hard human labor that represents, you can start seeing a different way of life. Each ounce of silver represents 10 days of hard human labor throughout all of history and even 2/3 of the world today. 1,000 ounces would represent 10,000 days of consecutive hard human labor, or over 30 years of work. Think about the historical significance of the average person being able to afford 1,000 ounces of silver. I had studied kings of England who did not have 1,000 ounces of silver in their coffers. In fact, for over 800 years, England had to use a tally stick system to act as currency in their country. During the fall of the Roman Empire, barbarians were at the gates of Rome and said that if Rome could pay 1 ton of silver, that the barbarians would go away. The Roman Empire could not or would not come up with a ton of silver to pay off the barbarians, and they were sacked. Today, that same ton of silver would cost just over $1 million. In the United States alone, there are over 11 million millionaires in the United States. Quite feasibly, one of these millionaires could liquidate their paper assets, retirement funds, stocks, bonds, and real estate, and easily afford 1 ton of silver, that which the Roman Empire could not or would not provide during its time of need. For about the cost of a new car, the average person can go out and buy 1,000 ounces of silver. The historical significance of that purchase is truly amazing. Even if you can't afford to buy 1,000 ounces of silver, think of all the silver that you buy in terms of days' labor. Can you buy 100 ounces of silver? That would represent 1,000 days of hard human labor throughout all of history and 2/3 of the world today. Even if you can only afford to buy 10 ounces of silver, that's 100 days of hard human labor when this paper paradigm collapses. Think about the buffer that could provide you and your family. The best estimates of the amount of silver that I see available are that there are 1 billion ounces of physical silver available. There are 7 billion people in the world. If all that silver was evenly divided amongst all humanity, that would represent about 1/10 of an ounce of silver. But we all know that silver is not dispersed evenly. Silver is being accumulated into stronger and stronger hands, who will not sell this physical silver so long as this paper paradigm exists. For about $2.50, you can go out and buy a mercury dime. Each dime you buy represents 1 day's buffer of food, shelter, and clothing for you and your family. The choice to me is simple. Forgo 1 coffee or beer while times are good and buy a mercury dime, or work for 12 hours of hard human labor during desperate times.
Speaking of the Chinese, they are furiously working to create a non-dollar world as they are striking deals all over the world, like the massive $400 billion energy deal with Russia or the massive amounts of gold they have been accumulating. I think it's safe to say that at the very least, the dollar is not going to exist as the world's reserve currency, and as the petrodollar system breaks down, we will certainly see a loss of purchasing power that will end in a hyperinflation. What is not as certain is what kind of role China will have in Asia or the world stage. One thing is for certain looking at how they treat their own people. You do not want to be forced to work for them in the future. The Chinese may be very clever for dumping the dollar and buying gold, but they seem to be completely ignorant to the real silver story, and that the manipulation of the silver market is so dramatic that I believe we will see a 1-to-1 gold to silver ratio. So while the Chinese stack gold, we can stack silver, knowing that the collapse of the dollar will benefit both precious metals, but also understanding that our silver will outperform gold at least 500% on a relative basis. The 2014 Silver Shield 1/10 of an ounce of silver Agorastspides was inspired by the historical ratio of 12 hours of hard human labor to silver. This 1/10 of an ounce 999 pure silver coin vividly displays in size and message of the sacrifice that so many made for so little. This serves as a reminder for the many soldiers and laborers throughout history that 1/10 of an ounce of silver was their honest day's pay for an honest day's labor. The Agorastspides were Alexander the Great's best legion, made up of veterans, his best battle-hardened warriors. The word Agorastspides translates into silver shield for the unique silver shield they carried into battle, which also inspired the reverse of this coin. The original silver shields serve as an inspiration on your most important mission in life, to secure your family's future with real physical wealth like silver. The 2014 Silver Shield 1/10 of an ounce silver Agorastspides is only available at the authorized dealers found at silvershieldcollection.com.